Tonight's special guest speaker, Dr. Matt Ajemian, is an associate research professor at Florida Atlantic University's Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, where he leads the Fisheries Ecology and Conservation Program. Dr. Ajemian is a fish ecologist who studies how various sharks, rays, and bony fishes interact with their environment. He holds a master's degree from Hofstra University and a PhD from the University of South Alabama. Dr. Ajemian has published approximately 70 scientific articles and has been awarded prestigious early career awards through the National Academy of Sciences and the National Science Foundation, as well as grants from NOAA and Florida Sea Grant for his research on fisheries-related interactions with sharks and rays. Some of his research has even been featured on the Discovery Channel's Shark Week and National Geo's Shark Fest. Tonight, Dr. Ajemian will tell us more about his team's efforts to better understand the complex issue of shark depredation here in Florida. Folks, please help me welcome to the stage my good friend, Dr. Matt Ajemian.
Thank you, Zach, and welcome everyone. Very excited to share some of our research with you guys on sharks and rays and some of the challenges we have with them in our fisheries here in Florida. So we're going to start with a little bit of a biology lesson. Don't worry, there won't be a quiz afterwards. And talk a little bit about how these animals exist in these ecosystems and the source of a lot of the conflict that we have with them as humans. And then we'll get into two research vignettes, one about the shark depredation challenge in Florida's recreational fisheries, the work we've been doing to characterize this issue and also to mitigate the issue. And then we will get into the ray work and in particular some research we're doing to mitigate conflict in the shellfish aquaculture industry. And then we'll do a Q&A session afterwards. So please hold your questions till the end, and we'll even have a little bit of time to do a little show and tell us some props here. So, all right. Shark and ray biology and ecology. So what are sharks and rays? Are they fish? Okay. Yes, they're all fish. They're cartilaginous fishes, okay? And it's different than, say your snapper or your flounder, or the things you're familiar with, which are bony fishes that have a true skeleton made of bone. Sharks and rays have cartilaginous skeletons, and there's a subset of them called the elasmobranchs, which are our shark skates and rays, and then the holocephalans, things you'll probably never see in your lifetime, but worth mentioning. They're called ratfishes and chimeras. Things you wouldn't want your mother to see, but very interesting nonetheless. And it's important to note that all these elasmobranchs, the sharks, skates, and rays, are all carnivorous, and where they sit in the food web kind of varies, but they could be at the top, the tippy top, like this hammerhead pictured here, and they could also be in the intermediate component of the food web. And that's because some sharks actually eat other sharks, other small sharks. I don't know if you knew that. But studies have shown time and time again in areas where you don't have sharks, at least in coral reef ecosystems, it can kind of cause a very cascading set of changes that basically turns the reef into densely covered with macroalgae. And that's because they're controlling things typically that eat the algae. And so because of that, we kind of assign their importance to many different types of ecosystems, such as coral reefs. But they naturally eat other fishes, including other sharks and rays, things like squid and crustaceans. The rays are generally just mesopredators. It's very rare to see them as at the top of the food web or chain, and their food can vary from microscopic things like plankton, like your mobulas and mantas eat, to benthic invertebrates. So those are things that live on the seabed or in the seabed, and most rays, most stingrays eat that. There are some rays that actually eat fishes that can actually stun them using electricity, and others that kind of corral them like a vampire bat. But we're not going to really be talking about them too much today. There's a subset of rays that we're really going to focus on, and these are what are called durophagous rays. That literally means hard eating, and that means they can basically consume things with very tough exoskeletons like crabs and conchs and clams. And this is what I spent a lot of my career studying, and so we'll get to them a little bit later. And another way they can do that is having jaws that are really fortified and flattened and tough teeth. So like on the right there, those are your cow-nosed ray and spotted eagle rays. Those are the types of dentition they have. So basically you have this kind of big surface smashing area that can really bust the hell out of shell, as we like to say. And so other cool traits about their biology, which we're going to be leveraging in some of our mitigation work, is this very amazing sensory organ they have called the ampullae of Lorenzini. People have probably heard of this before, right? The sixth sense of sharks. They don't see dead people, but they have an ability to sense changes, very small changes in electric potential. And they do this by these ampullae of Lorenzini. Those are the little pores that you see kind of on the face there. These aren't blackheads. These are actually fluid-filled or jelly-filled canals, which have a really highly conductive material in them that allows them to kind of sense electrical activity given off by prey. And so on rays, it's sort of underneath their mouth. And so we're going to be leveraging this tonight because this type of sense makes them super sensitive to things like magnets, and to a level where we can actually overstimulate them. And this has been leveraged for many years to keep sharks out of places and regions we care about. So why do they get in trouble? Well, I was alluding to one reason there. We share the same waters, right? So we have issues with shark bites and stingray envenomations, right? And we also sometimes share the same seafood, right? Whether it's finfish for most of the sharks or shellfish for some of these rays. So that's why they get the little dunce cap and get sent to the corner, because they get into trouble with us. And if you think about it, we're after the same thing often, right? So this is a very basic food web here, and you can see that humans are actually part of this as well. So we have to conceptualize that we are part of this overall ecosystem. And sometimes, as you can see based on the arrows, some of those are going to us and the sharks in this case. So it's easy for us to kind of fall into conflict. Okay, so what's going on here in Florida? What is the shark depredation thing that everyone's talking about? Well, depredation in general, this is like the partial or complete removal of something that we're targeting as humans, typically in this case on fishing gear, but we'll talk about how there's other settings for that too, by a non-target species. So in the example we're showing here, you have a sandbar shark, non-target species, depredating a red snapper. You can see he's bitten in half there. And so this is sort of like the sharks and sport fish example, or even commercial fish, but it goes beyond sharks. We've been working on depredation challenges with sperm whales in the sablefish fishery up in Alaska, wolves and livestock. So it's actually on land. It's something we're aware of. And these are all examples of human-wildlife conflict, things that we've had to contend with over the years and develop solutions to mitigate that. And so in Florida, obviously sport fish capital of the country, huge industry. This is something we're very aware of. And ever since we've been able to better document these interactions at sea, we're getting lots of information on some of these challenges. But it's not a new issue, okay? So does anybody know what this is or what this is called? It involves a fruit. Apple core, thank you, yeah. So it used to be so hard back in, over 100 years ago, to land a tuna, this is in the Bahamas, because oftentimes they would get apple cored before they brought this, they were able to bring this animal back to the boat, because there was, conceivably a lot of sharks. And this was something that, you ready? Ernest Hemingway wrote about. And so this is from a paper my good friend and colleague Marcus Dryman put together. He actually worked with some local historians here, I believe in Stewart, to get at some of this information. And apple coring was really a common thing. It was, a rarity to land a tuna in the Bahamas over 100 years ago. And they found a way to deal with it then. And I think we can find a way to deal with it better even now. And what they did is they basically changed their tackle, right? So they started using heavier gear. It would reduce the haulback time, and you'd be able to land the fish a lot faster. So just for some perspective, this is not a new thing. Despite that, we do see this coming to the forefront throughout the country. And this was a survey that was done in recreational fisheries throughout the United States, asking what people are dealing with in terms of depredation. The yellow is areas where people experience it more. The blue are the colder sections. You're probably wondering, how can you have shark depredation in Wisconsin? That's just where the people who filled the survey out were from. So, is anybody here from Wisconsin? Oh, there you go. See, in Florida. So, there we go. That answers that. But what's important to take home from this is that this really affects perceptions, and that's something we've been studying. And they did this kind of survey here to ask anglers, do you agree with the statement shark depredation is a result of regulations to protect sharks? And in blue, those are strongly agreeing people. In red, those are disagreeing. You can see overwhelmingly it is an agreement. Folks are in agreement with that statement. So that's a challenge for fisheries management to overcome that. And this has become very hot and polarizing here in Florida. So in 2022, there was a controversial shark fishing tournament. You can see pictured there. That was down in Jupiter. Just last year, there was this a very famous billfish tournament in North Carolina called the Big Rock. Anybody heard of Big Rock before? Yeah. So did you hear about this story? So this fish was disqualified because it had a shark bite in it, and these anglers lost $3.5 million, essentially, right? So they had the largest fish, I believe, and whoever was next actually won it. So this does surface, and no one's discounting that this isn't a challenge that we really need to deal with. So, but what do you need for this type of work? Like resolving human and wildlife conflict, you got to really be able to characterize the problem, right? We can take accounts and interview people, but you need a substantial data set to really say what's going on and to understand the scale of the issue and who is being affected by it. And understanding those perceptions of fishermen is huge as well, because they may be very key to resolving it. And so figuring out where they sit on the spectrum in terms of management and what needs to be done is a critical component as well. And then developing mitigation methods to reduce the negative interactions is all part of this as well. And so we think of shark depredation as a sort of CSI, right? Anybody watch CSI here? Remember the show? Yeah. So crime scene investigation. So what are we dealing with? So the victims, right? So what are the species that are being depredated upon? The culprits. So who's actually doing it, and what are the rates? So is this a single event, or does this happen, across the board? The scene, right? Characteristics of the scene. What are the environmental conditions that are affecting this? These are questions that we've been asking. And then we use these questions to kind of formulate this major characterization objective here in Florida, which was to take a look at the frequency distribution and species involved in shark depredation here. And we knew that working in our little lab in Fort Pierce at Harbor Branch, and going out in our little boat, and this and that, we weren't going to really get very far. And so what we elected to do was take a citizen science approach. And so we did this 3 different ways. We took a look at a couple of Facebook groups to see what people were reporting, so we can get a sense of the victims and potentially the culprits. We then distributed angler surveys or questionnaires. I wonder if anybody in here got our questionnaire a few years ago. And then we did some genetic analysis. So we actually went out and swabbed the bite wounds of these fish to figure out who was damaging it. Because a lot of the times this happens just, we show you these beautiful pictures, right, of the shark with the fish and they're right next to the boat. We've learned very quickly in this project that's a rarity, okay? Most of the time this is happening at depth, it's happening out of sight, and you need to really do some more work to figure out what's going on. And so this team of people who have worked with me on this project over the years, Mike McAllister, Lauren Brewster, TJ Ossendorf, were instrumental to doing this because I can't do this alone either. And so what did we do social media-wise? Well, we looked at this group, Sportsmen Fighting for Marine Balance. So this was a page that was started by some fishermen to basically, vent a bit on the depredation challenges. And so we asked if we could have access to it for research purposes, and they were very compliant and really, really helpful. And so they gave us access to this so we could figure out what kind of catch was being damaged to help us characterize the issue. And so over the course of 2 years, we reviewed 654 Facebook posts. We found that sharks, probably unsurprisingly, were the most frequently implicated depredator. However, our review of the content also revealed that people didn't see what happened about 80% of the time. So it was the implication, and obviously there's ways you can tell whether you got sharked or maybe hit by a Goliath grouper or something else, but it's still important to know that most of the time these are unseen. Bull sharks were implicated as the most common species, and then 48 different fish species that were being damaged by these sharks. Of those, about 3/4 of them were these guys up here. So these are our mutton snappers, king mackerel, greater amberjack, gag grouper, sailfish, and red snapper. And these are from different management complexes that the government uses to kind of track population trends and things like that. So this was important information to share because it basically tells these different managing agencies who's got to be talking to each other. And so our big ones were the snapper grouper complex. Most of the posts are from that. Highly migratory species, so those are your billfishes, tunas, and even sharks. And coastal migratory pelagics, which are your mackerels and things like that. So this is what our questionnaire survey looked like that we sent out to thousands of people throughout Florida. We asked them, have you been fishing in the past 3 months? Did you have any depredations? We asked them a little more information about their last depredation. And then on the right, we did ask them as well about what are your perceptions of the challenges and what should we be doing about it in terms of management. We gave people an opportunity to kind of free write a little bit too. And so we distributed this every 3 months. And the reason for that was to get a sense of the seasonality of this problem. So is it something that's, a summer issue? Is it a winter issue? Is it throughout the year? The only way for us to do that was to kind of pulse these surveys out. And we had a lot of people respond, over 2,000. Most of them were recreational fishermen, and about 40% experienced depredation at some point. Folks who are in the for-hire charter industry are certainly more affected by this, so that's more green than blue here, whereas on the recreational shore or pier side, you can kind of see not as many people are affected. We'll talk about why that is. And then the distribution of this interaction changes throughout the year as well. So based on where we basically distributed our surveys across these different regions throughout the state. And in yellow, again, this is like the warmer, so more people responding, and in blue, less people responding. So you can kind of see in wintertime, a lot of the depredation is really constrained to, this includes the Florida Keys, this yellow here. And really the Florida Keys are pretty big hotspot throughout the year. But it does shift, right? So as you get into summer, you kind of see a lot of these interactions moving throughout the Panhandle and Big Bend area. And one of the reasons we thought that was because red snapper season in the Gulf of Mexico was opening, and that led to a lot of these types of interactions. And so as far as by region, what kind of species was most commonly reported by fishermen, mainly snappers like you see here, red snappers and gags in the Gulf in particular, mutton snappers in our area here in the southeast, and yellowtails throughout the Keys in Southwest Florida. Also, we took a look at what people were targeting. So we asked them, okay, on your last depredation event, the one that you remember, what were you actually targeting? This is sort of how it fell out. And we found that people targeting deep water snapper and grouper, we only had 4 respondents, so it's not a huge sample size, we recognize that. But all 4 of them experienced this, whereas you get kind of inshore, there's a lot less folks being affected by this. So, and in between you got your pelagic fishes, your billfishes and tunas, dolphin, wahoo, and blackfin, and then snapper grouper here. So what we started to see was, okay, well maybe this has potentially something to do with how far away the fish is and how long it takes you to land it, right? Because conceivably, the longer it takes, the more time the sharks have to take you down. So that was one of the thoughts there. And then we said, okay, well, what do you guys think is depredating? And you can see a whole bunch of bull here. And so, seriously though, we were really trying to dial in how much is being lost by these fishermen, because we want to evaluate the economic impact of this. And so we broke this down again by sectors. And so charter for hire, obviously the most here, almost a third of their catch being reported as depredated. And then as you get closer to recreational boaters and then shore and pier, it gets less and less. I should back up and say we really focused this effort on the recreational fisheries because the government has folks working a lot with the commercial fleet, and we knew a lot more about it, and the recreational side of things was where the knowledge gap really was. So that's one of the reasons where you see a lot of recreational stuff here. And then we actually went out on some ride-alongs with the charters to actually see ourselves, like, okay, are they reporting, accurately? And it seemed that way for sure. I mean, we have a range of percent of catch being lost, which is what this is here. And these are the different trips. Each dot is like a different trip. So you can see it ranges, right, from 0 all the way up to 20%, at least the vessels we surveyed, but overall about 8%. So this one was interesting. So we asked the anglers, what do you think's going on over the last 5 years, right? And so has depredation increased? Has it stayed the same? Has it decreased? And on the right, excuse me, you can see if you were to stack the green and the yellow on top of each other, it would probably make for the biggest bar, right? So most people think this is increasing, but there's a lot of people who think this has remained the same, which was very surprising to us. It was surprising until we started looking at who was providing that report. So here's the for hire charter, commercial, and headboat sector. So these are all people who are fishing for a living, right? And trying to have an economic incentive to put the fish on the boat, right? Land the animal whole. And so these folks definitely think it's increased. You can see a lot more yellow, whereas the other boaters and recreational folks, they're a little more all over the map. In particular, the shore-based folks who really think it's stayed the same. And so this was another thing we asked them to say, okay, well, this is a problem. Is this affecting how often you go fishing? And it's not. But people are changing what they do. And so 90% of our respondents essentially alter their fishing practices after depredation. They'll either change locations, but a good portion of them will actually stop fishing for the day. So that does have some economic impact that we're definitely aware of. And then here was the perceptions of shark conservation. If you experienced depredation, you were much less willing to support shark conservation. And you can see that that was obviously a lot more prolific in the for hire charter, commercial, and headboat component. So another part of this, again, was to get remnants of this DNA that's on these bite wounds. So the way this works is the shark bites the fish, right? The sharks, and just like us, we're kind of constantly shedding cells, right? When we bite onto something, our saliva and that kind of stuff, it carries some of our DNA with us onto what we're biting into, and the same for the sharks. And so we went out, we worked with these for hire charter captains to swab the remains. And basically, we took the, everybody remember these COVID swabs, right? Basically the same thing. And we had them basically roll that along the bite wound. And we gave them a nice little infographic on how to do this. We demonstrated it to them in person. And basically we said, because we couldn't be out there all the time, guys, right? We have other things to do, got other proposals to write to fund this work. But we basically gave them all the materials they needed to do this, and we compensated them for it, which was very important. So they basically filled out this little data card, took a picture of the carcass, put their little vial, little swab into a vial, cut it, and capped it, and we picked it up when they were ready. And this worked out great. We got almost 100 swabs from 18 different species of fish. And these photos here, with the exception of the one on the top right, these are photos, examples submitted by the captains. So they clearly know what they're doing and are clearly capable citizen scientists. So this was outstanding. We got, out of those 85, 62 specimens were successfully sequenced, so that's over 80% success. No one's wearing gloves or anything like that, right? We try to tell them, hey, like, maybe don't put this like in the chumps, or the bait bucket, try and be, but we have to be reasonable too, because we don't want these folks to totally change their operations just for us, right? They need to still be making their living. And we got lots of different species on there, but primarily sandbar and bull sharks were the main culprits. And so if we compare this little table here, we're looking at what the anglers catch, and then what do they suspect the depredator is, based on the questionnaire surveys, the Facebook surveys, and then the actual swabs. This is sort of what you see for every target species, right? So you see a lot of blue and brown, those are our bulls and sandbars. And then if we get into pelagic catch, you see a lot more bull, right? So what was nice about this is we were seeing definitely some variations between the different survey methods, but converging in terms of the culprits. So to sum this up, our victims of shark depredation in Florida: snappers, groupers, coastal pelagics, and billfishes. Our culprits, primarily bull and sandbar sharks. Some others did appear in there, but these are the main ones of note. And where is this happening? Really shelf-wide, obviously inshore to deep water banks and things, but certainly more common offshore. We think fisheries that are taking a longer time to land catch seems to potentially have a correlation with the probability of a depredation. And we saw perceptions vary by user group, right? So lots of differences between the folks who are fishing for a living and maybe the folks who are not. So mitigation strategies become the next step, but it's important to note that fishermen are already doing things to mitigate it by altering their behavior. And so now we'll talk about some deterrents. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is this thing. It's called a shark band Zeppelin. I have one on stage here that you guys can come play with later. It is a type of magnet, and it's very strong. Don't put your phone up to it, okay? It may do very strange things. About 170 grams, that's about a 6-ounce fishing weight. It's designed to basically replace your fishing weight. And at the time when we were looking into this, there had been some industry testing, strong positive user feedback, and the company claimed it didn't deter target fish. We took a look at what they did. It wasn't enough. And so we got some funding from NOAA Fisheries to test this out and work with local captains here and assess the deterrence effectiveness. So the first thing we did is we worked with my colleague down on FAU's main campus in Boca, Steve Kajura. And Dr. Kajura is an elasmobranch person. Well, he's a human. He's not an elasmobranch person, but he studies elasmobranchs, and he studies their sensory ecology. So what he did is he actually took the Zeppelin, which you see in the middle there, in the gray, and he mapped out basically the magnetic footprint of it. And what he found was the effective range of it, basically where these values dip into the ambient in blue there, was really only about 30 or 40 centimeters. So that's only about a foot, folks. So not a huge footprint. And this helped us kind of make recommendations on how to rig this device. But the point is to basically get the device below where you're catching the fish, because as you reel the fish in, the shark is conceivably going to follow it from behind for the most part. It doesn't always happen. It would basically interact with that field before it interact with your fish. And so what did we do to test this? We did a bunch of fishing, which was fun. Yeah, sometimes we get to fish. There are perks to the job, I know. And we did this ourselves. We did it with fishermen. So we call fishery independent and then fishery dependent. So the fishery independent testing, we basically fished our brains out and used these inline cameras called Go Fish cameras to record all these interactions that were happening at depth, right? Because remember, we're fishing on the bottom, sometimes a few hundred feet of water. We're not seeing these interactions unless they're right up next to the boat. So we have to film what's going on. And we'll see some cool videos in a second. I see some people salivating, I know. Or it's dinner time. You folks probably eat dinner already. Anyway, we have a dummy version of the Zeppelin as well. So in order to test whether this is effective or not, we had to replicate the device, but basically take the magnets out of it. And so we basically compared what we caught and how many depredations there were on the magnet and then the dummy tag. And so we fished in mainly reef habitats, and then we also did a catch composition comparison. And then working with industry, we went out and did these ride-along surveys. We demonstrated the gear, and we had people, customers who were on the charter basically use the devices and provide us feedback on what they thought about it. And so this is where we fished. Some locations just offshore of here. You see in red, these are fishery independent trips, and then in white, those are trips we did with the charter shock leader. And so we only were able to get 10 trips in based on funding and some other technical issues. But that basically amounted to 52 total fishing sessions, so about 52 hours, almost 2 days of straight fishing. And then obviously because we're trying to evaluate these interactions using a camera, sometimes we would be impacted by bottom visibility. So, but we did get some really cool footage. So this is what I like to call the beginner's luck video. This is really the first time we did this. And what you're gonna see in this video is there's a fish here that's being caught. This little white dot behind it is the deterrent. And you'll see another white dot behind it as it gets reeled up, which is actually an extra weight, because sometimes that 6-ounce weight isn't sufficient to hold bottom in some of these areas. And so you're gonna watch a shark approach and see what he does. So we're reeling, and just kind of veers off. So again, we don't see this footage until it comes to the boat. So nobody knows any of this is happening, right? So we just fish and just kind of hope and look at the videos. Typically at the surface, we can download them real fast. So let's just watch that one more time. See the shark come up, and then just kind of hangs a left. Maybe not. So that was a successful one. I'll let you fill in the blanks here. So you see here we're fishing another artificial structure. You can see some culverts. This is off of Fort Pierce. And you see a red snapper is messing with the bait. Sorry, I know it's kind of very shaky. He gets on and we start reeling him in and pulling him over this pipe. And there's one, there's two, and gone. But that was the dummy. Gotcha. So that was exciting. And so, we look at a lot of these videos, and then we compared, okay, are we catching anything different with this thing that's pulsing at a pretty significant magnetic field? And we're not. We're catching all the same stuff. with the exception of, we did catch 4 sharks, and they're all caught on the dummy. So you do think this thing is working. As far as its ability to serve its intended purpose as a shark depredation deterrent, that's a little more up in the air, which we'll talk about in a second. So in reviewing these videos, right, we obviously take a look at every little interaction that you saw there. This is what we see in terms of what's interacting with the catch. So bull sharks, Goliath grouper, which this is not intended to deter, and sandbar sharks. So same top 3 that you heard about earlier, right? So people are telling the truth. No. So a few other things on here as well. So you probably wouldn't have thought like we would get a gag grouper depredation, but we did. So some fishermen would call that a score, but for us, you know, it's not really good for the unit in testing its effectiveness. And so these are the top 3 species. And as far as depredations that we actually recorded, like that one you saw, we only recorded 12. And even though over half the time we're seeing these animals on video, the sharks and Goliath and that kind of stuff, they only really interact with the catch a fraction of that time. And so the chart is here. We've got 6 depredations on the dummy and 6 depredations on the Zeppelin. 3 of them have been on bull sharks on the dummy. We did get 1 unlucky one on the Zeppelin. And 4 Goliath grouper depredations on the Zeppelin. So that's kind of a challenge, right? Because the device was never intended to deter those fish, but we're still losing gear regardless. And that plays into this part. So when we interviewed anglers and demonstrated this, and we had a few depredations, but not many, most importantly, what we got out of this was asking these anglers, what were you willing to pay for this? Because there's the time retailing for about $75, and a range of answers, anywhere from $10 to $80, but the average was $26.33. So this thing is, you know, currently not priced well, at least for the area. So the manufacturers are aware of this. I'm not sure what they're doing, but it's good information to have. So what are we doing now, and what did we find? So mitigation-wise, it doesn't seem like the shark ban Zeppelin impacts our catch composition. The depredation rates were low, at least where we were fishing and the way we were fishing, which I think plays into this. And even though sharks are there. So what are we doing next? Well, we were lucky to get a donation from the Munson Foundation to continue sampling through this summer so we could raise that sample size and see how effective this thing is. And because without that, we can't really develop those robust data sets I was talking about earlier and do statistical analysis. So the effectiveness is still, you know, not quite clear, but it does seem to do some good things. The challenge with the Goliath grouper, at least on artificial reefs here, could be something we really need to think about. And we're disseminating this work. So obviously talks like this, we've been developing whiteboard videos, which are instructional videos that are very short, and we'll be releasing some of those soon. And then presenting to Fishery Management Council. So down here, this is Mike McAllister. He's one of our research coordinators, and he's been working on his PhD part-time with this project, and he is pictured there at the council meeting, Western Pacific Regional Management Council. So you got to go to Hawaii last week and talk about all of our work. Poor him, I know. But it just goes to show you that other places in the world are really interested in this research because this isn't just a Florida issue. Okay, so the rays. How do rays get in trouble? Well, they eat shellfish, right? And things like cow-nose rays, like these guys school up, and they've been a challenge in places like Chesapeake Bay, even in New Jersey. These are mainly issues with restoration practices where people put out millions of clams in a small little area, so it's like a, you know, it's like they died and went to heaven. And even our eagle rays get into trouble sometimes. So you guys probably, if you haven't seen these animals, they're beautiful, but they're also beautifully destructive. And so they eat conch, they eat crabs, this is Kona crab in Hawaii. Even had issues with them. Cousin of the species we have here in French Polynesia, these are permaculture longlines for black-lip oyster, where they apparently have created some challenges. And so why are these challenges occurring? There was a hypothesis presented about 20 years ago now, hard to believe, that because shark populations were declining at the time, which does not seem to be the case, I know, in many places now, that this allowed the rays to basically release from any controls, and that was related to the demise of the bay scallop population in North Carolina. And this led to kill tournaments designed to control these populations, which is unfortunate because this ray only produces one pup every year. And so you can basically wipe out the fishery in a very short time. It actually happened in Brazil. And then people actually looked at this data set on shellfish populations over time, and they said, okay, you guys looked right here. You didn't look at the whole time series. And the point was here that a lot of these shellfish fisheries were declining already, and the rays can't be the sole source to blame. So Kano's rays were kind of exonerated, but because we still do these restoration practices where we seed shellfish in very small areas at very high densities for good reason, this still leads to challenges. And one example of doing that commercially is the shellfish aquaculture industry. That's how they literally grow shellfish. And so that is one of the phases of what they do. There's very little harvest of shellfish, at least locally here anymore, in a commercial sense. It used to be a thing in the 70s and 80s, and now it's primarily aquaculture based. So things are grown up kind of in an upwelling system, like a little shoreline lab. And then the clams get to a certain size, though, where you got to take them out of these tanks and you got to put them out in the wild for their final phase. And they grow them to the little necks and top necks and chowder clams that we like to eat. And that has to happen in the field. And so you can see here, this is an aerial image in Virginia, just to show you kind of the extent of some of these operations. And so the clams are placed in these little mesh bags, and then they're staked to the bottom and allowed to grow there for anywhere between a few months to 18 months. And there are challenges with rays. We did some work. It was one of my former students, Brianna Cahill. She looked at whether the rays could actually, damage clams in this kind of orientation. They can. And I have another student now who actually looks at whether the rays actually come into these shellfish aquaculture leases. Nobody had actually done any of the work, so we've been setting these little time-lapse cameras in these in this shellfish aquaculture lease. This is up in Sebastian, and you can see the rays are definitely there. So we had all these permanent magnets with us for the shark depredation project. We said, hey, well, it seems kind of effective in that realm with some nuances and other challenges, but maybe this could be something we apply to shellfish aquaculture. So we worked over at Moat Marine Lab over in Sarasota, across the state from here, and this is a recent PhD, Ariadna Rojas Corso, some of her work. And you can see we basically took those clam bags and we made them into little mini modules, and then we put deterrents on them and we put dummies on them, and we even left some unprotected. So what do you guys think the rays did? The same? Different? Okay, so this is the control, right? So there's nothing on the bag. Hear it crunching? Yeah, no good. Yep. Okay. All right, so that's the control, though. Here's the magnetic one, or the Zeppelin, I should say. Nope. Yeah, so what we found was these Zeppelin treatments, look at the blue ones, these are the crushed clams, not much. And then in yellow, these are the bags. So we also took notes of whether the meshes on the bags were damaged or broken at all. Not a single broken bag. So Seems like it works, but you're probably like, well, that was in the lab, bat. What does that mean for real kind of situation, right? And we'll get there. But Ariadne was able to show effectively the zeppelins reduce the likelihood of feeding success. So that's this one here. You can see a major downward trend there. And then here's some of the field footage. So you're going to see a ray come in. This is in Sebastian Inlet. And there's a zeppelin on this one here. So he's in a little bit of current, so he's getting all these like other stimuli that we can't present in the laboratory, right? And he's going to mouth it. Who thinks he's going to crunch it? Come. No. So very, very similar to what we saw in the lab. So it's nice to see the transferability to the field. So we think this has some promise. So putting all this together, sharks and rays share prey resources with humans. This is the source of a lot of conflict, at least in terms of depredation. Shark depredation seems to have increased in recent years. There's certainly a field of thought that seems to say that it hasn't changed, but most people think this is increasing, and this could be due to a lot of things. It could be due to more sharks in the water, which there are some great signs that populations are recovering. So sharks were heavily overfished, and I say sharks, but it does depend on the species, but large coastal sharks, many of those species were overfished in the 80s. The first management didn't really get installed until the early 90s, and we may just start to be seeing some of those benefits of management. And so despite that, we're seeing sandbar and bull sharks most involved. And those are populations that have been recovering, at least sandbar have been recovering strongly. They've been closed for many years. There are more people fishing than ever, so that's something to keep in mind as well. More sharks, more people fishing, probably more depredations. We do see some regional, seasonal, and sector-based variation in depredation. So it does matter who you're talking to and about, and when you're talking as well. That all affects this severity. The ray work is less understood, but no less important. We're just starting to scratch the surface there. And mitigation using the magnets seems to show promise for both shark and ray depredations, but there are caveats like we talked about. And the other thing is the affordability of this device being produced at scale is a bit concerning because it's kind of expensive. So where are we going? And by the way, all of this work involved direct collaboration and input from both the fishermen and the clammers, who are absolutely key to understanding these issues. And we're tremendous resources. So what are we doing? I already mentioned the shark depredation work. We're going to increase sampling. We've also focused a lot on the reef fishery and bottom fishing, and I think we really got to break ground in pelagic fisheries and talk about how some of these folks could get some mitigation, because folks we talk to in particular that target sailfish, particularly from here southward throughout southeast Florida, say this has become a very overbearing challenge, and there are significant economic impacts being suggested. And so obviously this shark band Zeppelin sinker thing may not be the right thing, but there are a lot of testing now with electrical deterrents, things that are going to actually pulse things out to a broader area as well. So there's some work we can do there. Here are some examples: Repel-X, Shark Guard. I actually brought a Shark Guard that one of the manufacturers who was at last week's conference and our workshop in Hawaii gave us, so you guys can take a look at that. And then on the ray depredation front, we're interested in working with some other species, such as cownose and stingrays. A lot of our work to date has been on eagle rays. And we're looking into some more affordable devices. So this is, again, Steve Kajura's brainchild here, taking two opposing metals, zinc and graphite together. He's shown that this can be effective in reducing bycatch of sharks in longline fisheries. It would probably work for rays as well, but we have to test it. We're actually doing that in the coming months here up at Harbor Branch. So that'll be exciting. And just like we were able to get DNA off the carcasses that the sharks leave behind, I think we can do the same thing for clam bags and shell fragments. And we've done some work to suggest that this is feasible. So this could be another avenue for future research if clammers need this information. Okay, so I'm just going to close and acknowledge all of our fishing partners. The first and foremost, Captain Patrick Price, the late Captain Price, who ran Daymaker Charters here out of Stewart. He really was instrumental to getting this collaboration going here. And so it's kind of nice to do this presentation here, pretty much in his back, what was his old backyard. So we're really thankful to him, and he gave us access to that Facebook group as well for us to do some of our data analyses. So Captain Price, rest in peace, and Captain Cole Hazaleaf from Shock Leader, he's up in Fort Pierce. He's the charter we did a lot of the ride-alongs with, and some other folks, Terry Wildy up in Sebastian, Johnny Bobner, who's down in Jupiter, and then Ed Mangano, who runs Orchid Island Shellfish out of Sebastian. He's been really instrumental in getting our, facilitating a lot of our research on ray depredation. So our work here has been funded by NOAA Fisheries. I mentioned them earlier. The Cooperative Research Program, which unfortunately was cut last year. That was the program that gave us the ability to do that really important characterization work, and not having that funding is a tremendous challenge. The bycatch reduction and engineering program, which I do hear is being continued, which is exciting, and some of our specialty license plates with the aquaculture research program. And it takes a village to do all this work. I can't do this alone. So just all these wonderful people from our institution, FAU Harbor Branch, Mote Marine Lab, Florida Sea Grant, Mississippi State University, and even the folks at Shark Bands who gave us dummies and other things to test out. And just going to close by saying we do our own lecture series. Does anybody know about the Harbor Branch Ocean Science Lectures? Okay, a couple people, yeah. There's some information on the back podium the back table over there for you to sign up and learn more about what we do. I'm one of many scientists there, and we've got some cool things going on there and to learn about. We also have these boat tours now that everyone's really excited about. It was voted the best eco tour, the Treasure Coast, last year, I think. So really cool thing. I mean, we'll take an ROV out and you'll see the Goliath grouper in our canal. It's pretty cool stuff. And with that, I'll answer any questions. Thank you. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How often do the batteries need to be recharged?
Can you repeat it one more time?
How often does the battery need to be recharged?
Okay. The question was, how often does the battery need to be recharged? And I believe you're referring to the devices up here. Okay, so the permanent magnet, actually, it has no battery requirement on it. So the Zeppelin is constantly on, so to speak. Whereas the electrical one, I think it can last for a few hours. And it's activated by salt water. Good question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, is this Zeppelin suitable for humans to wear? Is it harmful?
The question was, are the Zeppelins suitable for humans to wear? So yes, the company Shark Bands, actually, they got their initial start doing protective technology for surfers and beachgoers and that kind of thing. So they make a bracelet version of this, as well as that you can wear on your wrist or your ankle, and it seems to be used by the surfing community and some other folks, for peace of mind. Some folks also use it who do wade fishing, so that, they don't step on stingrays and that kind of stuff. Or if they step on a stingray, they're potentially more protected. So there's other orientations of it. I'm not trying to sell this product, but just letting you know there are other motifs for other applications, including what you were insinuating. Yes, sir.
It's a little different.
Yep.
Got to clean the bottom of your boat. that keep them away?
Okay, so
Would any magnet keep them
right.
away?
So the question was, if you're cleaning the bottom of your boat, would that magnet keep the animals away? Presumably so. Yeah, so there are folks who wear these all the time. The folks who are like underwater and diving a lot, I've noticed are also using the electrical deterrents. There are like motifs where you can kind of wear that, particularly spear fishermen. Those are the folks who seem to be gravitating towards the electrical deterrent. So that might be, a better, because the electrical deterrent can basically produce a much larger field, right? Whereas the magnet is relatively small. So if you got a really big magnet, potentially, yes.
Would any magnet work?
Would any magnet work?
Like I have that's all right.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like a pretty big magnet to me, so the guy's showing a magnet about this.
Drop things in the water.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know what you're referring to, the device that you could like cast and like if you lost your keys or something, you can grab it. I haven't tested that effectiveness versus this one, but somebody could, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, in the middle here, yes. Great question. Are barracudas ever a problem with depredation? They are. I haven't seen them, at least where we've been fishing, so much, but there are folks who do report them, particularly in the Gulf. We did a lot of work when I was a postdoc. I did my postdoc at Texas A&M, and the oil and gas rigs over there, they're kind of like loaded up with barracuda under the jacket, the platform jacket that basically holds it up in the water. And so I've seen some barracuda go after red snapper that we were catching there, as well as dolphins. So that's a whole nother thing. We're not going to talk about marine mammals, though.
Matt, let's grab a question from one of our Zoom audience members. What are your thoughts on divers feeding sharks? Is it possible that this is affecting shark depredation?
And I don't need to repeat the question, right? Yep. So, this has come up in several discussions. Certainly sharks have the ability to learn, and that learning ability can, enhance their return visitations to places. There's certainly data to show that, but as far as the linkage between those activities and those activities affecting recreational fishing, that's not well demonstrated.
And actually, we have a good one that follows up on that. There are fishing captains who swear that sharks are actually influenced by the footprint or the sound of a fishing boat. Is it possible that this depredation is becoming a learned trait, or is that just an unscientific old wives' tale?
Yeah, no, I do think there's a possibility there. Sharks can hear, their hearing range isn't great, but they do sense low frequency sounds, which are definitely delivered by fishing vessels. And so I don't know how acute their ability is to zero in on the same vessel each time, but they certainly can, learn and respond to auditory stimuli, which would suggest they're capable of doing that. Just, how specific they can be, I don't feel comfortable commenting on that. Yes.
Why are they named Zeppelin? You think of World War II?
Yeah, I think it's the question was, why are they named Zeppelins? And I think it has to do with the shape of the Zeppelin, kind of blimps. Yep. Yes.
The depredation that you're talking about is the fish on the way in. The depredation that is very annoying to recreational fishermen in shallow water is releasing fish and the sharks. If you release them deep into the mangroves, the sharks will charge in after.
Right.
And that, you haven't touched on that, so.
Yeah. So the question was, the gentleman pointed out that everything we've been talking about is basically as we're landing the fish and bringing it to the boat, but there's a whole other side of things after release. And he mentioned some observations of seeing animals get taken out there. And you're right, we didn't touch upon that purposefully because it's sort of a whole other, sector of the problem or challenge. And so, that's something we need to be, dealing with. There's been a lot of concern, for example, with, the mandate to release reef fish using a descender device, right? Which is the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council mandates that a venting or descender device has to be on every vessel if you're fishing in federal waters. And a lot of folks have told me that, hey, as basically you clamp a device, if you haven't seen it, onto the fish's mouth, and that's attached to a weight, and that takes them down to the bottom. And I guess the feeling out there is that makes them more vulnerable to being taken out after release. And a colleague of mine, he did some work on that, and they did not find that at all, actually. So he had a very very cute title to his study. It was the descenders or treat tethers, I think, right? So, are you basically tethering the fish and not allowing it to go get away from the shark? But he's actually shown there's some, there's not a lot of truth to that, at least based on what they were studying in the Gulf of Mexico with red snapper. But I do think the post-release mortality, as we call it, is an important thing. And there are folks who are studying that. And this does play into that as well. But we specifically focused on what we can do to mitigate what happens as the animal's being brought to the boat. Yes.
You may have said it, I lost it. What is it about the magnet that deters them? What is it that they avoid the magnet?
Right. Yeah, and it's hard. So the question is, what are they actually avoiding with the magnet? The magnet basically modifies the electrosensory field that the animal's experiencing. So it's hard for us to conceptualize because we don't have the sense, right? So it's hard to relate. But as far as what we can conceive based on observations and studies of the biology of these animals is that they're getting just basically overstimulated. What I try and liken it to, or what I think it might be like, is you ever walk into one of those perfume stores and you get to the door and you just turn right around. At least that's what I do. Ma'am, yes, in the back. Yes.
Is anyone studying what it's doing to the clams? Is it doing anything to the ones that have in the bags of them?
Right. The question was, is anybody studying what the magnets are doing to the clams? And my response is, we asked the clams if they were bothered, and they never said anything. They just clammed up. Okay. It's a very good question. We have not, and that's one of the goals in this upcoming study. So not only are we going to, do work in the lab with this sort of less sophisticated device, but cheaper electrogalvanic device, but we want to make sure it's not going to have effects on clam growth as well, right? So the whole point of putting those clams in those bags in the lagoon or whatever is to grow them out, which is why we call them grow out. And so we want to make sure that there's nothing that's affecting, those very important parameters for the clams as well, because ultimately we're trying to facilitate better clam survival, and growth could be part of that.
We've got a couple of Zoom questions we can add into the conversation. We regularly hear that shark populations are declining. How come depredation is simultaneously increasing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Not all shark populations are declining. There's certainly several different stocks and species that have not recovered. There are others, though, that are showing preliminary signs of recovery, and we think that is potentially part of this increased human-wildlife conflict, because we do have more sharks than we probably did 30 years ago. I don't know if we have more sharks than we did 60 years ago. It's hard to get to those baselines, but from when we've been starting to manage and track these populations, Some of these stocks are on an upward trend. And so, yeah, I think that's a great question, but, I think, again, it's the devil's in the details. You really got to dial in which species have recovered. Not every shark species is on the same trajectory. They have different, doubling times. That basically means when a population can, obviously double or replenish itself. There's wide ranges of fecundity, meaning how many pups per litter a shark will have, and those things can affect their resilience and how they respond.
We have another related question from a Zoom attendee. Do you think the increase in depredation could also be a result of the declining water quality issues we're facing and overall reef health? In other words, are there less fish available and that leads to more competition between sharks and humans?
Yeah, this is another comment I've heard a few times, and it's hard to say, there's a lot going on out there, a lot of variables, and yeah, some fish populations have also grown, and been restored and well managed. Others not so much. As far as how water quality plays into it, that's an interesting thing. Obviously, the first thing I think of with deteriorating water quality is how the visual field might change, right? And maybe, to me, that would impair these interactions, right? So that wouldn't be the case. But maybe, more freshwater is obviously we know bull sharks are a big depredator out there, and they are more tolerant of freshwater than other species. So that maybe changes, where they track, but, I don't think we really have strong evidence of that just yet. But it's certainly something to be aware of and looking forward or, looking ahead, so. Yes. And then we're going to get to you in the corner. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Two quick ones. Is there any insight into the depth of depredation, like bottom, halfway up, top?
Yeah.
And then two, behaviorally, is there a certain shark that eats just the tail, some that eat half the fish, some that eat the whole thing? Like, is there any insight into behaviors as to if you've lost a fish, should you just leave its head floating around?
Right.
Catch it on its second time around?
Yeah, so, all right. First question was, are we seeing any patterns with depth, right, in shark depredation on reef fish in particular? We kind of got at that, not indirectly. We got at it indirectly through, we did ask people about, depths they were fishing, but we didn't really see a trend. As far as where it happens in the water column, that's not a question we asked. Maybe it's one we should have, but we suspect if people didn't see it, then it happened out of not at the surface. So I think most of these things are happening, at depth and out of sight. Whether it's mid or at the bottom, it's hard to say. And then your other question was about
Is there any kind of species that eats more of the fish?
yeah. So the question was, are there any shark species that prefer tails versus heads, for example? And I don't think so. I haven't seen that, but we honestly don't have, a ton of data on that, but could be interesting. Yeah. Okay, sir in the corner. Hi. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm curious as to the logistical practicality of the deterrence where we deploy millions of plants where basically thinner bell.
Right.
Different stingrays from southern to cows to eagle rays.
Right.
So how practical is it to actually increase the success rate of projects like that?
Right. So the question was regarding clam restoration projects that FOS is involved with, and whether we could integrate any of these technologies into that process. And yeah, it's a great question. Again, the footprint of these deterrents is not, at least the magnets, is not so big. as well as the zinc graphites. And so I think we still have a lot to do behaviorally with the animals to see if they'll be responsive, because honestly, all we know for certain devices is how sharks respond. And rays have a very different distribution of those pores in their system. And some rays seem to have more densely packed pores than others, so that suggests, ray species may differ in how they respond, so I think eventually we want to get there, and that's definitely an application space for this, and that's why we're doing this work, so we can actually help, because we've, talked to folks who've done restoration work, like north of Sebastian there, and they've lost a lot of their clams to what they suspect is ray depredation. So it's something we're actively working towards. We're hoping to actually partner with you guys, at least in tracking interactions. And so this coming summer, we'll be working with several groups on a grant through Florida Sea Grant and Department of Environmental Protection to basically study some of these interactions, see if they're happening, when they're happening, how that's affected by where people are placing clams in seagrass or not seagrass, because that's a big concern, right? There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of money being put into these operations, and we really don't understand how the ambient predators are going to respond. So we're hoping to get there, and eventually, if we demonstrate that this remains a challenge, we'd certainly like to integrate these deterrents. But I think we're still a little bit, unsure about whether these are effective, just in a controlled setting first. Once you bring stuff into the environment, it gets very complicated very quickly. So we're planning to start, controlled as we can be, and then eventually get there. But yeah, definitely hoping to work with you guys and looking forward to it. Yes, sir.
Can you refresh my memory, because you're talking a 30-year span of a shark recovery. We'll say what we used to call sand sharks.
Yep.
And the bull sharks didn't seem to be as prevalent in that time. But what knocked them back so far? I don't remember, there was.
Overfishing, yeah.
Overfishing by what?
Oh, sorry. So the question was, what has knocked back species like sandbar sharks to where they were in such disarray? And we suspect overfishing, yeah. I don't think we knew. It's no one's fault, honestly. I mean, nobody really had the information on the fecundity of these animals, their growth rates. I mean, we've learned that these things take a lot longer to mature even than anybody had really expected. And I think, this is a common theme in fisheries in general, is we don't know what the tipping point is for a population until we overexploit it. And for that reason, managing agencies have been trying to be a little more conservative with how we develop new fisheries because of that. But in the 80s and 70s, when the commercial shark fishery took off, nobody really had any idea what to expect. And then we started to learn a lot more about their biology, and I think things started to make sense that, hey, these things take, longer than, in some cases, longer than humans to mature, and in some cases, they don't produce a lot of pups, and yeah, so I think that's probably the, most likely driver for that.
All right. Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question here at the Blake.
Who's that? Somebody? Oh, sorry.
Have you done enough long-term resistance on the magnet to know if they get fatigued, like your example with perfume, olfactory?
Right.
Will it die off just because they get used to it?
Yeah, so this is a question about whether the animals will basically get acclimated to that stimulus and no longer be effective at deterring them. And, we have not really simulated that, because I can tell you, at least With the ray stuff we did in captivity, we did that for as long as about 5 hours. And the reason we chose 5 hours, well, it's kind of convenient because that's how many cameras we had and the battery life. But also, it kind of represents a lot of these rays will come into, are very tidally driven, their movements, right? So you guys probably see eagle rays hanging out in the current and stuff, and then when things kind of lax, they move out onto the flats and at high tide, right? And so we're trying to simulate that, and over that period, we did not notice we had no evidence that they were acclimating, the eagle rays. Some of the videos we saw last week at the Western Pacific Regional Management Council, the work that's being done in Hawaii has shown even some of these electrical deterrents over time, there is some acclimation happening that people need to be aware of. So that still, points to, moving locations after a certain amount of time. The other interesting thing was they showed this video of the work being done at University of Hawaii, and there's like 30 sharks, like in a room this size, right? And they're drifting a bait with this electrical deterrent. And shark 1 through 28 just, freaks out when this thing comes by them. And then there's just this one shark that just goes straight for it. So, you get some of this inter-individual variation that we have to be contending with as well. Yeah.
All right, folks, unfortunately, that's it for time tonight. Help me give Matt a big thank you.
Thank you, everyone.